Hello, my name is Chris Tusa and welcome to Retro Axis. On this channel we'll be talking about retro computers, electronics, programming, bulletin board systems, operating systems, all sorts of things related to computers and electronics, both hardware and software. In my experience, I've spent a lot of time, especially in my younger days, working with Apple II computers and then later BBS systems. Recently I've done a lot of programming and I've enjoyed a lot of time in the data center as well. So I have a lot of experience and information that I'm hoping to share with all of you. So welcome to the show. We have a website, it's www.retroaxis.info. And there you can find all the supplemental information, things that we'll create on this show, updates on projects. Also you'll find files such as today's episode. We'll be posting the supporting files from our demo. So I hope you enjoy the show, welcome, and don't forget to bookmark our webpage and subscribe to our channel. Thanks. So for our first episode, we're going to talk a bit about the C64 Mini. Now, I never actually owned one of these, a Commodore, as a kid, so I'm by no means a Commodore expert. But what I would suggest to you is do take a look at the 8-bit guy. He's got a really great video where he actually goes in depth on this product and actually talks about some of the quirks and features of it. So what I'd like to actually focus on today is rather than do an unboxing, I've already got mine set up here on my desk, and I'll walk you through my setup. Then I want to talk a bit about some of the tips and tricks that I've learned and explore some different ways that you can use this product. So the designers obviously intended this to be a gaming platform, but my curiosity was really around what other uses can we have for this product. So let's take a look. Let's begin with a quick look at my setup. The C64 Mini is connected to a 24-inch LCD monitor. It's also being passed through an S-cart to HDMI adapter. Isn't really necessary as the C64 Mini does have an HDMI port out of the box. However, because I've got an Apple II GS connected through that S-cart connector, I'm going ahead and just using the extra port that provides for that C64. On the right-hand side, you'll notice there is a USB hub. This is necessary in order to give me more ports. The C64 Mini only comes with two. In this video, I'm actually needing to use a joystick, a keyboard, and a USB drive, so the hub is necessary in order for me to have the additional capacity for the ports. So the first thing I did after getting my Commodore set up was to flash the firmware with the latest version. You can find the latest downloads of the firmware at retrogames.biz. And also, one thing that I thought was interesting was I actually emailed support. I had a few ideas that I thought maybe could help improve the platform. They were actually quite responsive and very quick to respond, and it sounded as if they were open to suggestions. So I do plan on sending them more suggestions as time goes on. In this particular episode, I'm currently flashed at version 1.2.0. So in the future, new enhancements may change, and some of the things I'm showing you today may become irrelevant. But in the meantime, let's get into some of the tips and tricks that I've learned. One of the early complaints about the C64 Mini was the inability to add your own games. There was a lot of complaints that the built-in ROMs were, not the ones that were the most popular or the most fun to play. So a previous revision of the firmware introduced the ability to have a file manager. And this has been great, and I've been playing with different games that I remember from my childhood. But what I did find was that some ROMs didn't work out of the box. So for example, when I go to load Conan is a two-sided disk, but when I go to run it, it starts the process and then it returns very quickly back to the Commodore 64 basic screen. And if I attempt to type run again, it simply returns me to the ready prompt and the program just doesn't work. One thing though is the Commodore 64 Mini provides you an ability to create a custom CJM file. This CJM file is really just a way that the Mini provides you to make some modifications to the settings of that particular program. So for example, you can change things like the joystick mapping, the machine type, whether that be PAL or NTSC, enable accurate disk emulation, and various other settings. There's also a naming convention the C64 provides, which allows you to set various options based on the file name, but this is actually quite time consuming and tedious, and most people don't want to rename all of their files. Now there is a very convenient web UI for creating CGM files. And this is made available at the C64minizone.com. And they have a tool that allows you to plug in various settings, press submit, and it will give you a CJM file. But really, once you have one CJM file, you can pretty much use that as a template. Now, for me, I've created two templates which I'll be using in these examples. One enables accurate disk emulation, and the other one keeps the accurate disk emulation, but also remaps the joystick for those games that expect the joystick to be in port 1, as the C64 Mini really defaults to port 2 for the USB controller. So let's take a look at how we fix Conan to work with a CJM file. So in order to get Conan working, we need to create a CJM file. Shown here is a CJM file that I've loaded into a text editor, and I'm following the nomenclature that you can find on the support site for the C64 Mini. You'll notice here that on line 1, X is really the platform itself, the entity type. I'm not specifying whether it's PAL or NTSC. It'll be automatically selected by the C64 Mini and auto-detected. But the most important one here is accurate disk. This is what Conan will require in order for it to load properly. You'll also notice I have drive icon. This allows me to see when the drive is being accessed, and it can be used as a good indication to understand if it's actually working or not. You'll also notice that joystick 1 and joystick 2, there's also the ability to set flags for those here as well, and those are already in the CJM file that I have created. So closing that out, it's important now that we actually take a look at the files themselves. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've created two CGM files, one for side 1 and one for side 2. And it's very important that you name these files precisely the same name as the ROM file itself. The only difference being the extension at the end is .cjm. Now that I have loaded my CJM file, let's take a look and see if Conan will load now. So let's go into that folder. We'll notice that even though the CJM file is on the USB stick, the C64 Mini's file loader does not show any file that is not a disk image. No matter, we'll go ahead and click Conan side 1, and we'll notice it does not return us back to the basic prompt like it did previously. And here we're presented with a splash screen that shows, Datasoft presents Conan. So this is great. This is the exact result that we were hoping for. And the program continues to load. You'll notice in the top right, you might have seen a quick flash of a disk symbol. This is also an indication that the disk is actually continuing to load. So we'll wait just a minute as it continues to emulate that disk. And we'll see now we're being prompted to flip the disk and press any key. Now this is another area where in the current version of the firmware, the C64 Mini does not provide you an ability to flip a disk or change a disk. So there is a workaround, and we'll talk about that now. So in order to work with multi-disk images, there's a couple things you have to do from the standpoint of your file system layout on the USB stick. So we'll have to make a couple of changes. So let's go ahead and exit Conan, and we'll need to remove our USB stick and put it back into our PC. Now that we have Conan booting, it's time to configure the file system layout in order to handle the multi-disk. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create two folders, one called disk 1 and the other called disk 2. Now the purpose of this is we need to basically rename both of our CJM files as well as our disk files to be the exact same name. And this is important because the snapshot will expect the name to be the same. So let's drag side 1 into disk 1 and we'll move it. And we'll drag side 2 into disk 2. And we're going to need to rename these two files. So what we'll do is we'll remove the word side 1 and the underscore, calling it simply conan.cjm and conan.g64. And we'll do the same thing for the second disk. Now that we've restructured the file system layout for Conan, you'll notice now we have a disk 1 and a disk 2. Both files have been renamed the exact same. Both are called Conan on both disk 1 and disk 2. I'll go ahead and load disk 1. And just to talk a bit more about that, why is that important? Well, the way that the C64 Mini takes snapshots, which is the feature we'll need in order to flip disks, it expects that the snapshot is the same name as the image file in which it's loaded. So as we start the disk and we prepare to flip it, when we go from disk 1 to disk 2, the C64 Mini is going to expect that file name to be the same. So here we're ready to flip the disk. So I'm going to click the joystick menu button, and I'm actually going to save state. So I'm going to save, and you'll see I've got some previous save states where I actually have played the game and used it. But let's show you really quickly. I'm going to save it here in the first slot. I'm going to press the save button, which is the bottom left button, and it's gone ahead and saved that state. So now I need to quit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to disk 2. I'm going to load disk 2. I'm going to fire that up, and I know that this won't load because it's a data disk, so there's no boot or anything on here, but that doesn't matter. So I'm going to go back to the menu. I'm now going to load, which is the third button on the bottom. I'm going to load that, and you'll notice it's back to flip disk and press any key. Hit the space bar, and you'll see now that it's loading. And lo and behold, Conan is ready to play. So there we are. So Conan is now up and running. So now that brings me to tip number 3. So by default, Conan does not work with joystick port 2. So it only works with joystick port 1. You can verify that if you go to the number keypad on a USB keyboard. That seems to be the place where joystick port 1 is configured. And so what we want to do is put another CJM file in place, which allows us to now modify the joystick port. So rather than show you all of that, I've already gone ahead and done that, and I'm actually using the joystick here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and just play Conan and show you that it does work. After you put the CJM file in place, that joystick port 1 works. So there you go. There's Conan. So that's it for today's episode. Be sure to check our website, www.retroaxis.info, where I'll be posting copies of the CJM files that I used in today's examples. Next week, we're going to talk about Pascal and Pascal compilers on the C64 Mini, and we'll take a look at how those work and how you can use them. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.